In this episode of the Breakdance Unleashed series, we will learn how we can create this kind of split accordion pattern using Breakdance and Elements Hive. We'll start by adding a section and a columns element that will house our images and advanced accordion side by side. On the right column, we will add the default Breakdance Advanced Accordion element and delete the existing accordion content elements that it contains by default. Next, we will add our first content accordion element and add a heading element, text element, and button element to it. Since we will be using the Breakdance AI assistant to fill the content of the section, we want to make sure that all the relevant text fields have some dummy text. This will give a hint to the AI assistant when generating the content which fields need content and approximately how much text to generate for each field. We will duplicate the content accordion element a few times and change the border style to be applied to the bottom only. Now we can prompt the AI assistant on the section to generate the content for us. And as you will see, it does a pretty good job at generating the right amount of content based on the dummy text that we have. Now that we have our content, we can add the images that we need on the left column. We'll start by adding a div element that will contain all 4 images. We want all images to overlap each other. We can choose to use absolute position on the image elements for this, but in this case, we will create the overlap using CSS Grid. On the div element, we'll set the display to grid and give a value of 1 for the items per row setting. On the image element, we will create 3 CSS classes. A default class that will be shared by all images, an active class that will define the active state of an image, and a unique class per image so that we can selectively target each image. When we duplicate the image, we see that the images are not overlapping yet. The reason is that we haven't defined the position in the grid for each image. Let's do that now by editing the default CSS class that's shared among all images and defining the needed position in the selector. Now that the images are overlapped, we'll update the CSS classes assigned to each duplicated image element so that each one has a unique class. The CSS class for the active state is also only required on the first image at first, so we can delete it from all the other images. On the default CSS class, we will define the default state of our images. In this case, we want them to be hidden by default, so we'll add an opacity of 0. We'll also define a transition to smooth out the animation of the images. On the active CSS class, we'll define an opacity of 1 so that the image becomes visible whenever we assign this class to it. The last thing we want to do before creating our interactions is add unique images to the duplicated image elements. Now we can start creating our interactions on the first accordion content element. For the trigger origin of our interactions, we want to use the accordion button element rather than the accordion panel itself. For this, we can use the Use a Child Element option to specify the selector of the child element, and we can use the dev console to get the unique class that's assigned to each button. Our first interaction will remove the active class from all images when we click the accordion button. We'll add a trigger of click, an action of remove attribute, and an attribute type of class. For the value, we will use the active CSS class name. The target will be a CSS selector, and the CSS selector will be the common CSS class for all images. Next, we'll duplicate the interaction, change the action to set attribute, and the CSS selector of the target to the unique CSS class of the first image. As you can already tell, this interaction will add the active class to the first image element. Now we can copy the settings, paste them on the other accordion content elements, and update the second interaction to target the correct image. Notice that we have defined a simple fade-in and fade-out transition, but you can define any kind of transition. The fundamental setup of such an interaction will not change from what we covered here. We can now look at the end result on the front end and test our interactions. Looks perfect. We get a new image every time we open an accordion panel as expected. Of course, you're not limited to using images either. You can use videos, Lottie animations, for which you can control the playback using the Interactions extension, or any other elements you need. If you want to take your breakdance websites to the next level, don't forget to click that like button, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to be notified of future videos.